Asada. Woo! They never got her.
Yeah!
Asada. Woo! They never got her. Asada. They never got her.
One, check. One, three. My board, check. My board, check. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Great, great to see everyone here. Can everyone hear me everywhere? Can I get thumbs up over the room? All right. In the very back there. All right. Once we get started, we would really appreciate everyone to kind of refrain from having conversations with people next to you. We really are interested in hearing what our guests are going to say. I'm sure all of you are here for that reason. So we appreciate everyone being here. My name is Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets, the founders. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for making this home away from home. We are a place where racial and cultural connections are consciously uplifted. We're a place where art, culture, and politics continues to come together and collide. We're a place where you can take a deliberate pause and feed your mind, body, and soul. Thank you all for being part of our community. We're going to be getting started with a short video, and then we'll introduce our guests. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Karen Attiah, and I am the founder of Resistance Study Series, formerly known as Resistance Summer School. There's a story behind that name change, and it all starts with one of my former titles, which was Professor Karen Attiah, formerly an adjunct professor at the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs. As I wrote in my Substack, when I got the chance to teach at Columbia School of International and Public Affairs for the spring of 2024, I was elated because my dream as becoming a teacher in a global environment had come true. I wanted to use that opportunity to build the course that I never had as an international affairs student. I was studying human rights and media at SIPA, and I never heard or learned about specifically how constructs of race and identity are formed, and how mass media historically has shaped our understanding of race and the global order. So I knew that this was rarely taught in international schools, of course, or journalism schools for that matter, and I rarely had professors that looked like me. The class went on to become one of the most popular courses at SIPA, so much so we were over-enrolled. And some of my students even went on to have their class assignments be published in international media outlets, which of course made me very proud. A few months later, after the end of the course, I received the news that the course would be canceled and the department that it was housed in would be dissolved. But my hunger for teaching never left. I still continued with my work as a columnist for the Washington Post, but I still really wanted to find some way to be able to teach this material. So on April 20th, 2025, I put out an idea on Blue Sky. I remember at the time, I would have been happy if 20 people, 30 people would have signed up, but over 2,000 people showed interest in the course, and well, I decided to keep rolling with it and opened up a website, and then over 500 people signed up in 48 hours. And with the resources from those over 500 students, we were able to fund more than 40 scholarships. And thus, the Resistance Summer School was born.
A lot of people have been asking me, why'd you call this Resistance Summer School? That's not neutral. Why would you do that? You know, aren't you scared of the... And honestly, that came from you guys. The name stuck. So y'all are part of the RSS squad. But I will talk again about how I also truly believe in this time, keeping our minds open and being willing to unlearn a lot of the things that we've learned in the world is a part of resistance. We're resisting being closed off. We're resisting being narrow. We're resisting building walls instead of bridges.
With Brida and Marinica's help, we launched a website, we booked a film crew and a place, and we got on with the teaching. Along the way, we were joined by renowned speakers. Race, Media, and International Affairs 101 was a success. Between juggling writing for the Washington Post and running a class, I did learn a few things. As the summer course was nearing a close, it became clear that many students had formed close bonds, friendships, had connected deeply with the material. It was pretty clear we had a community on our hands. And of course, a community that wanted just more than merch to buy. So we decided to do it again. Race, Media, and International Affairs 101 for the fall was on. And so was Race, Media, and International Affairs 102 for those returning from the summer. But of course, it was fall. A change was needed. We needed to come up with a more evergreen name for what we were doing. And so we came up with Resistance Studies series. We had over 600 people enrolled in 101 and 102 this fall, meeting with us every Monday and Wednesday for 7 weeks. Joining us for the fall was Ariel Angel, Michael Luo, Yusuf Manayer, Sean Jacobs, Rokaya Diallo, Nicole Carr, Maria Hinojosa, Nanjala Nyabola, and Tim Wise. Well, outside of class, there were a few, let's say, personal distractions on my end. But, as the motto says, a luta continua, the struggle continues, but victory is certain. You can hear from some of the students themselves.
The Resistance Studies series has been such an enriching educational experience for me. The robust source material, the resources, the speakers. I think the best antidote to fear is education. And I hope that Karen blazes a trail for others.
Hi, I'm Jess, and I took Race, Media, and International Affairs 101 in the summer and 102 in the fall. I can't say enough good things about this series. It's been informative, eye-opening, and fun. It's granted us access to some of the most influential voices on race and media from all walks of life. Professor Attiah and her team have created a truly open space for learning, where no topic is too taboo to cover. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We dove headfirst into subjects that were difficult, and we approached them with vulnerability and curiosity, all thanks to her efforts. And at a time where media literacy and media criticism is more important than ever, these classes truly met the moment. And they've been so much more than classes. They've been places to gather, build community, make connections, inspire people to act. It's more than I ever imagined it would be when I signed up. And it's wild to think that Professor Attiah was nearly kept from teaching this at all. But instead of relying on outdated legacy institutions for validation, she and her team turned this into an even bigger learning opportunity for the masses. It's a testament to her will and her power and our power. So I'm genuinely feeling so fortunate and proud that I got to be a part of this. And I'm excited for whatever's next, because I know that this is just the beginning. So a huge thanks to the entire resistance study community. We move.
When I started taking 101 in late June, I had no idea what I was getting into. I only knew that I wanted to learn history from a different perspective. In the first class, Karen made side comments and references to where are all the AP World History people at? And I began thinking to myself in the cheap seats, wait a minute, I could have learned this history 35 years ago if I had only taken an advanced class. What could I have done with this knowledge? It just so happens today I am the reluctant chairperson of my public school district's Social Studies Advisory Committee. And I had the audacious idea in the second class to maybe incorporate this newfangled AP African American and Latin American Studies classes into the general education curriculum in elementary and middle school, where a redesign is already taking place in our school district. It has been 6 months, and Karen was not only the impetus for this idea, but also as an advisor as I workshopped ideas with her. I will present this proposal to my school board in January, and God willing, these kids are going to learn about public occurrences, Rock Springs, Ida B. Wells, Pedro Gonzalez, and other people and events that I learned in 101 and 102. I feel like we are at a moment where we need all the help we can get. With the understanding of our collective history and the recognition that we keep repeating it, we can also learn from their solutions. If our children can learn true history now, we can ensure that none of this ish never happens in the future. We can all be the change. You just need to identify where you have power and influence and start there, and be prepared to be uncomfortable. It will be dangerous, not because of our ideas, but because of dominant society's resistance to them. We got to be brave and speak our truth, knowing that there will be consequences. From Ida B. Wells to Karen Attiah, both experienced the repercussions of telling the truth. Thank you, Karen and team, for a life-changing experience.
We are in a profoundly difficult political moment where censorship and cowardice are reigning supreme, or so it seems, because these institutions can try to cancel us all they want. They can cave all they want, but history has shown us that the human spirit will continue to build and will continue to create community anyway. So that's what we're going to do. They can cancel us all they want, but we move, we build, we will create. Thank you all for being here.
I don't know about you, but when I went to school, they didn't have resistance studies then. But it's great to be able to have courses like this. Now we're going to start our panel. I would like to, first of all, bring up to the stage the person that will be moderating this, Virgia Sharma. She is an award-winning American journalist. She was the editor-in-chief at Teen Vogue until Condé Nast, she decided to cancel the Teen Vogue and incorporate it into Vogue itself. So shame on them. This is one of the most courageous publications around. They continue to cancel these things, and it's interesting. The more they start canceling things, the more better things rise. So we continue to rise, and thank you all. We have some of the most courageous people right now, journalists with us today. So I'm going to bring up Mr. Sharma to introduce them to you. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.
How's thank you so much for that incredibly kind introduction. At Teen Vogue. But mostly, I'm just really excited to be here tonight with all of you and this all-star crew of panelists. So I'm going to bring them up. Karen Attiah, Olufemi Taiwo, and Mehdi Hasan, please join me on stage. We're here for a conversation called Pivoting to the People. We need to build platforms that serve the masses when institutions refuse or fail to do so. A little bit of one show, I will be moderating and asking questions to our group. And then we should have about 30 minutes at the end for audience Q&A, so definitely keep that in mind. To start, let's hear about Karen Attiah, who we just heard the series details in the video. She is, of course, a journalist and a former columnist for the Washington Post, known for her insightful work on race, gender, human rights, and international affairs. She is the founder of the series and native to Dallas, Texas, a former Fulbright scholar in Ghana who has a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University School of International Affairs. In 2016, she became the Washington Post founding global opinions editor, commissioning op-eds on global issues, and was named an opinions columnist in 2021. Karen has received numerous awards, including the 2019 George Cook Special Award, NABJ's Journalist of the Year, and Washingtonian Magazine Starter Watch Award. She is also a recipient this year of the Read 100 Award. Please have a round of applause. And Karen and her resistance studies colleagues organized this entire event panel and got me down here. So we're Olufemi Taiwo is an associate professor of philosophy at Georgetown University and a fellow at the Climate and Community Institute. He is the author of the critically acclaimed books, Elite Capture and Reconsidering Reparations, a contributor to Greta Thunberg's The Climate Book, and a past recipient of a Marguerite Casey Freedom Scholar Fellowship. Please have a round of applause for them. And then last but definitely not least, we have Mehdi Hasan, the award-winning British American journalist, broadcaster, and author. He is the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of the new media company, Zatea. Mehdi is also a Guardian columnist, host of Head to Head on Al Jazeera English, and the best-selling author of Every Argument, The Art of Debating, Persuading, and Public Speaking. He previously worked as an anchor at MSNBC and a columnist for The Intercept, and he is here fresh off the flight from Doha.
human level, it's being able to say, hey, I see you. Like, hey, your story is important. Your story is important. Your community is important. How do we get other people to see that and hopefully build empathy and build power that way? So yeah, that's I think what I would say.
Mehdi, you're also coming at it from the journalism point of view, of course. So what's your perspective on people power and building power?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I think it's pretty simple, actually. When people say what's people power, I'm sitting here right now. People power is everyone in this room. People power is looking out on a crowd of people who are coming together because they care about their community, their country, their democracy. And every time I come to an event like this, especially at Busboys, give it up for Andy Shalal for hosting these events. Every time I come, I think it's like my fourth one this year that I've sat up here. And I leave here feeling energized and inspired. And I feel like I'm not being gaslit anymore by the mainstream media or by politicians in Congress. I look around and I see, wow, other people are also angry and outraged and energized and care about what's happening to our country. I'm not just imagining it from behind my laptop screen. I spend a lot of time online, unhealthy amount of time online. My wife and kids would say, I need to quit Twitter tonight. So when I do get off a screen and come, I love doing public events, and I did come off a 15-hour flight. It is good to come here and see people turn out and say, you know what? We actually, as a collective, give a shit about what's happening in the world. And I see my role as a journalist, as an independent journalist, as a founder of a media company, trying to elevate everyone else's voices, not just my own voice, but who else out there can we elevate? Who else out there can we platform? When I was at MSNBC, that was what I tried to do, get marginalized voices on, get voices of people you don't hear on. Toni Morrison once said, anyone who has some power has an obligation to get that power to someone else. And I think that is what all of us have to do, whether we are in media, whether we are in academia, whether we are in business, whatever walk of life we're in, whatever power we have, use that to elevate other people's power. That for me is people power.
Actually, can I say one quick thing? Mehdi, you were one of the first people I edited as the Global Opinions columnist, actually.
What an innocent time that was a decade ago.
Back in the good old days, sort of. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Femi, our resident philosopher on the panel, tell us your perspective on people power.
I guess if I were to say what people power means to me, it is the power of people to make things happen. And said that way, it sounds a lot more obvious than it is. So let me say what I don't mean. I think it is important to give people a voice and to give attention and recognition to perspectives that are usually ignored. But I think one of the things that we can often forget is that outside of the formal trappings of, raising a complaint to the people who do have the power, to Congress people, to police officials and government officials, and getting them to make different decisions, we can actually directly do things. In New York, just a few days ago, a big crowd of people essentially ran ICE out of town. ICE Border Patrol, they've been facing steep resistance of neighborhoods coming out in Chicago, in LA, in DC, and passing out whistle campaigns and running these people out of their neighborhoods. And that to me is people power. It's not just being heard, but it's getting things to shift because you've been heard, because you made a stand, because you are organized with your neighbors to say this is what we want to happen and not happen in our neighborhoods.
Thank you for that. At Team Vogue, where, as you heard in the intros, I was most recently there for the last 5 years. I just left there last month. One of our most popular articles of the year, which I think we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get deeper into media and journalism discussion, but it was about how to protect your community and your classmates from ICE. So that kind of solutions journalism, I think, is one thing that kind of gives all of us on the panel hope, and to actually see audience interest in it, just like Mehdi was saying, the interest of all of you and being here with us in person tonight is really incredible. So thank you again for that. Now, what has the second Trump administration shown you about formal institutions, whether it be media, academia, or political party infrastructure? Mehdi, you want to go first?
I mean, it's been awesome. I mean, I can't think of any good examples, there are very few good examples. Across the board, big business, big law, big tech, Ivy League universities, and of course, media organizations have just rolled over. And we heard a lot from fascism scholars last year in 2024, warning that this would happen, warning that obeying in advance is the worst thing you can do when you have an authoritarian like Trump or Stephen Miller in office, because they don't even have to pass a law or do an executive order if people are already anticipating some kind of repression and rolling over in advance. And that is what we've seen in my industry. We've seen that in journalism. You look at ABC News settling a lawsuit they easily could have won. You look at CBS News settling a lawsuit that was ridiculous, frivolous lawsuit about editing. You look at all of these media organizations that keep just bowing the knee. Washington Post and some of their personnel decisions and editorial decisions. Jeff Bezos. I mean, look at, we knew it from day one, right? They didn't hide this stuff. This didn't happen over time. January 20th, 2025, at the inauguration, the big tech bosses, the media overlords, have better seats than Trump's own cabinet members. They're all there. And I do wonder, again, to go back to what we talked about with people power, it is quite hard to get people to stay energized when ordinary people are seeing the most powerful people in the country rolling over and refusing to stay independent and refusing to stick to their principles. And you look at these billionaires, I mean, there is that phrase, right? What is the point of having fuck you money if you never say fuck you? Right? If you're always just running timidly like Bezos and Zuckerberg. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg could buy 12 planets, but he's so scared that Trump might do something to his business that he sits, you saw the video that was leaked, not leaked, but the audio that was caught, where he says some number, we're going to invest 600 million. Did I say the right number, Mr. President? I just came up with it. He just whispers in Trump's ear. Like, there's no self-respect to these people. And so politically, we can talk about what we need to do to build independent power centers, independent media, how we break away from the billionaire class that have let us down time and time again. But even if you put that to one side, separately as human beings, these people have no self-respect, no dignity. They will sell their own mothers, their own souls to get ahead in life. And I think that we should think about just as human beings. How do we avoid? Don't let your kids grow up to be Mark Zuckerberg, is what I would say. Like, that is so important for us to remember at a time like this, because they're so soulless and so principleless that really I don't think we can think of a better lesson of why we need to be doing our own thing.
Help. Yes. Karen, as Mehdi was mentioning, you have had 2 high-profile, let's say, cancellations, not in the way it's commonly used, but actual cancellations from Columbia and the Washington Post this year. So what did that teach you about institutions?
Gosh, I know this has been quite the catastrophic calendar year for me. You know, and I'm, to be honest, like, I think in a lot of ways I'm still processing what that means. I mean, I think one of my first reactions, right, was I'm a daughter of immigrants, right? And I think a lot about the story that America sells itself and the rest of the world about itself. And I think one of the interviews that I did first was with Wajahat Ali, and I just sort of lost it a little on the Substack. And I remember just saying, I did everything right. You went to the right schools, you get the right titles, you do all the right things, you play the corporate game, and it's still not enough to protect you in this country, like Mehdi was saying, where you're seeing people who are operating based on just straight power, sycophancy, right? Cowards. And I guess I couldn't help but think of my parents and how much they sacrificed, right? Just to see that in this country, a white supremacist, patriarchal country, it could all be sort of knocked down. That being said, one thing that I do say about these institutions is, I would say I gained the skills to resist them through them. So, Columbia, I was a student at Columbia. I learned about atrocities, genocide from the top genocide scholars. I learned how to identify that patterns in society, right? So when the genocide in Gaza happened, I was able to say, hey, that's the thing, right? When I was at Columbia and I was teaching at SIPA, and I went to see the encampments for myself. Unlike some of my media colleagues who couldn't be bothered to take the Acela train just 3 hours to see what was going on at Columbia, I did that. And I saw in those encampments some of the most beautiful things that I've ever seen. The students had set up the tents, but they had also invited lecturers to come speak to them. Their education was continuing in those quads. They had set up food reservoirs for themselves. They'd set up an entire sort of almost beautiful society amidst the oppression that the Columbia administration was raining down upon them. And so in a lot of ways, I remember talking to other lecturers, some who were afraid, very, very afraid to speak out, even though, again, Columbia being the home of teaching about social work, teaching about, like I said, human rights. And I remember in many ways, that was a lot of the inspiration for me to do Resistance Summer School, because you see all this oppression. I saw the NYPD march us down. That was one of the scariest moments of my journalism career. And I've been in war zones. I've been, northern Nigeria, Boko Haram. That to see the Columbia being willing to use force on its students and its lecturers, and I still saw people teaching and resisting anyway, students who were losing their housing, losing their health care, who were being kicked out. I saw the administration throw their stuff in the trash. And for me, but they were going to learn and teach anyway. So for me, I just thought, I'm like, well, this is what I learned in the encampments at Columbia. I'm gonna set up my own teaching encampment. I've got the internet, there's no reason why I should be stopped from, I can gather people under, a tree and teach. There's no reason why these people should have control over us being able to connect with one another. So I think for me, that was Columbia. As far as the Washington Post, I mean, I can't lie. That was definitely, a blow. All I was doing was my job, was to comment on the very fact that political violence, extremist violence, and the race and gender, breakdowns of that. But again, same thing. The skills that I learned while I was at the Washington Post, collecting voices like Mehdi's, being able to assemble, being an editor, allowed me to be able to say, hey, this would be this is how I could build a school, the same way I build a section of writers with ideas. That is what I'm gonna pull from this Washington Post experience and use it to build up the community. So point is even those of us who are in these institutions while they last, they're teaching us the very same skills that we will use to bring them down, to be honest. And that's the way I see it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Yes. Now, Femi, I would love for you to talk about your conceptions of power, particularly if you see the pitfalls and risks of them as you describe in your book, Elite Capture.
Broadly, I think of political power, at least the strategies of political power that I can most imagine being applied to this moment, as being centered around the ability to withhold, right? If X happens, we don't go to work. If Y happens, we're not paying rent. If Z happens, we're not paying our debt service payments, right? You have to have something that the people in power want that you can deny to them on the basis of organization, because I don't think the other appeals are going to work for the reasons Mehdi and Karen have just been talking about, right? Half of these guys atop these institutions are cowards in empty suits, like we were talking about, like Mehdi was talking about, right? Just don't believe in anything, willing to trade their dignity, willing to trade the health of their institutions for friendly relations with increasingly fascist regime. But, the problem might even be a little bit worse than that. The other half of these people are collaborators. They're collaborators. They think they're on the same side as the regime because right now it's targeting people that don't look like them. And they delusionally believe that once the Latino immigrants and the Black immigrants and the Asian immigrants have all been corralled, once Doge has slashed the government capacity to a fraction of what it was, that measles is going to respect their class boundaries. And they're out of their fucking minds. And they have to be stopped the same way the regime has to be stopped.
So to follow on that, is this now the exact time for building a new philosophy of power?
I like the old one. Maybe not the old liberal one, but, at the beginning of the 20th century, a quarter of the landmass and population of the world was colonized under the British Empire alone. Very recently, we had formal apartheid in much of the world, and it took a lot of political thinking and a lot of organizing to decolonize much of the world, to change the political structure of the world. And I think that's why it's so important to study, right? That's why we need resistance school, because we actually don't have to start over, right? There are tools that other people have used in the past to resist laws and expansions of the federal government in the direction of oppression. I'll just give one historical example. A historian, Jesse Olsavsky, wrote an article for Hammer and Hope, which is a place I'm an editor at. It's a magazine of the Black Left, talking about how people organized against the Fugitive Slave Act. These committees of people, largely Black-led, both people who had successfully stolen themselves from slavery and people who were free beforehand, women-led, these organizations of community people fought to harbor people who were fleeing slavery, fought to fight slave catchers, both literally and in court, sought to organize legal defenses and organize the Underground Railroad. So all these kinds of organizing and the kinds of philosophy and thinking around it happened in that space. Historians have called it a kind of freedom school because they were interviewing people who were fleeing slavery and figuring out what strategies would work and what they had experienced fleeing the slave catchers and what they had experienced on the plantation and how they could, put the screws to the people in positions of power and get better legislation and confuse and confound the slave catchers. So all that's to say, whether we're looking a century ago, decades ago, there's stuff out there, and we can just check it out.
That makes me think of the 2025 version, of course, my Gen Z plug. I'm sure you've seen some of the reporting of people forming huge communities on TikTok to flood ICE hotlines or to call in false tips, or K-pop fans who are organizing against some of these right-wing efforts as well. So that's definitely happening, digital organizing in 2025 as well. Now, Mehdi, we have seen and discussed the caving of media, academia, and other institutions less than 1 year into this second administration. How has that affected how Zateo does its work? And in silver lining, I suppose, has it been a boon for Zateo?
That's a good question. As a small business owner, I have to shamelessly ask the crowd, who here is a subscriber to Zateo? Great. For those of you who didn't put your hands up, hang your heads in shame. And make sure you subscribe tonight. Zateo.com, Zeteo.com. Got to do the shameless stuff. Sorry.
Yeah,
Got to do it. Look, let me just answer that question by also referencing something Karen said earlier. She talked about the Columbia and the Post and the blows, right? And I lost my shows at MSNBC and I ended up quitting a couple of months later. In hindsight, all of those things were good things, right? Karen is freer today than she was 6 months ago. I am much freer than I was 20 months ago. And, you know, I'm a Star Wars man. You know, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You strike me down, I will come back more powerful than I was before. And I think that is the case in the independent media space. I am loving where I am right now. I'm not just saying that because I want you to subscribe, though I do want you to subscribe. But even if nobody was subscribing, I'm loving what we're doing because we're able to build a completely new, ground-up media organization that the aspiration is to show people that journalism can be done in a different way, an honest way, a blunt way, an outspoken way, a non-compromised way. That is what we've been trying to do since we launched March 2024. We now have 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube. We have over 1 million followers on Instagram, 600,000 subscribers on Substack. We're having a major impact on the conversation. Our podcasts have won awards. And it's really interesting because, as you say, there is that clash that personally and emotionally, I feel sad to see what's happening to my industry. As Karen said, we were part of this stuff. I worked at the BBC. I worked at Al Jazeera. I still do a show for Al Jazeera. I worked at NBC. I've gone through the system. I went to Sky News. Great experiences, all of them. And to see the media both being killed off, but also committing suicide at the same time, seeing people turn on the media for good reasons and bad, personally, that makes me sad. But obviously, professionally, I'm like, that's a great opportunity. Because if we had a healthy, popular, credible, mainstream media, then you wouldn't need a Zateo. The whole point I created Zateo was because I saw a gap in the market. I saw that there are people failing us in the journalism space when it comes to Gaza. There are people failing us in the media space when it comes to challenging fascism, even saying the word fascist, right? Karen and I worked for media organizations where people would bend over backwards to avoid saying the F word, to avoid saying genocide. You see the leaked memo from the New York Times that the folks over at The Intercept got, where words like occupation were too controversial for New York Times reporters and editors. So I think in that space, obviously, it's easy for me to come along and say, hey, I'm going to create a media organization. And then we get millions of followers because people are so pissed off. Mm-hmm. When CBS is sold to Barry Weiss, to David Ellison, and he hires Barry Weiss, or when the executive producers, 60 Minutes, Bill Owens quit saying, I can't do journalism anymore. On those days, we do see upticks and spikes in subscribers. We see people fleeing the Post or MSNBC or CBS. And again, professionally, great. But personally, as a Democrat, small d Democrat, as a citizen, it saddens me that this country's media institutions have decided to cede the ground. And of course, the fourth estate is a key part of our democracy. What was it Jefferson said? If I have to choose between newspapers and elections, I'm going to choose newspapers every time, right? Because you have to have that free press, that free exchange of ideas. So that is what I came along to try and do with Zateo and my colleagues and our contributors, some of whom you can see their pictures on the walls. I see Naomi Klein over there, who's one of our contributors. So what we tried to do is fill that gap. And the gap is huge, and people's anger is real. People are fed up of being gaslit. And the thing I get most from people is, thank you for just saying it clearly and bluntly without bullshit. And that is what we try and do with our journalism at Zateo, which most of you know because you're subscribers. The people who aren't will know tonight when they get home.
Yes, definitely a round of applause for that. It was actually in Zateo in the newsletter today, a story about the Washington Post editorial board not disclosing how, we talk about the story with the wealth tax.
We published a rebuttal to a Washington Post editorial board piece about basically misrepresenting the effects of a wealth tax. And I just can't think which person associated with the Washington Post might not like a wealth tax. Can't think.
That same person has also been announced as the main sponsor for the Met Gala next year. So, it's interesting. It's all interesting timing.
At a very modest, humble wedding in Venice, I think.
Yes, exactly.
That same person at a dinner with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who the CIA credibly accused of murdering one of his own writers, Jamal Khashoggi. I was the editor for Jamal Khashoggi, so when we were talking about all these things, at least for me, this is not just about politics, this is life or death issues. That journalism, the people, I've worked with writers who've lost their freedom, been jailed. Of course, Jamal Khashoggi being killed. So part of all this, to keep in mind that it's not just about clicks and subscribe, those are all important. But this is life or death, people who risk their lives to work at these institutions because they promise safety, right?
But also principle, right? To go back to what you said earlier.
Absolutely.
Like, people want to be led, informed, guided by people who have basic principles. And you look at these billionaires and you look at the Bezoses, the worst thing about them is that they're not ideologues. I would have more respect for them if they were a hardcore conservative or GOP ideologue. All of these people, like Jeff Bezos a few years ago, was condemning MBS.
He was at Jamal's funeral.
Yeah, and then he turns up at the White House. All of these people, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, all of them were condemning Trump. And now they're in bed with Trump. That is what really turns people off for understandable reasons.
So I've been a fan of Karen's work for a long time, but it really was kind of your relentless support of Jamal after his death and just refusing to let the public and other journalists in our industry forget that this happened. Just like you're talking about with MBS now, and I think there are also photos of Elon Musk now cozying up with them, of course. So I feel like your work there, if you could talk a little bit about what motivated you to fight for his memory all of these years in the face of institutional ignorance, maybe sometimes intentional ignorance. I feel like that's a good blueprint for the kind of consistent resistance that we need now.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, well, first of all, just as a human being, like Jamal was one of the kindest, like most authentic people I'd met. And I remember in the year that we were working together, and it was like he was watching from abroad. I mean, he lived here, he was a Virginia resident. He was watching Saudi Arabia turn under MBS into this place. I mean, I remember his first op-ed with Saudi Arabia wasn't always this repressive, and now it's unbearable. For those who don't know, Jamal was from a pretty prominent family, very close to the Saudi royals for quite a long time, until the Crown Prince came onto the scene in 2018 or so, or 2016 or so. And actually, what a lot of people don't know, and they should, is that Jamal was banned from writing in Saudi Arabia, not because he criticized Mohammed bin Salman, it was because he criticized Donald Trump in 2016. That is what got him banned from writing. And so the piece that he did with me in 2017 was his first time speaking out, period. Right? So I guess for me, I just saw that human spirit. I think like it's hard to describe in any other terms than just the human spirit cannot be crushed that easily. And I saw that up close working with him. His family was put under a travel ban. He was getting all sorts of, and I saw how depressed and lonely it made him. And for him, writing was what kept him alive through that. So for me as a human and as an editor, I was just like, the very least I can do is to help keep your spirit up. Let's do these pieces, okay? And I guess I carry that with me. I'm like, if Jamal believes so deeply in not only writing for his own like self, he raised the profile of other Saudi activists that were being imprisoned. And I guess for me, I'm just like, how could I stop, right? Like, I don't know, how this person who gave everything, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit, anyone who follows me, I'm a bit of a fighter. I'm just very protective of my people. I'm very protective. And I also saw, though, that it was bigger than just Jamal. And I said this at the time, and I say this now, the impunity with which his murder went sort of unaddressed, unsolved. What we saw at the White House not too long ago, Trump saying, things happen about Jamal. It's not only infuriating, but it is deeply chilling. We've seen the stats of transnational repression increasing. These are some of the most dangerous years on record for journalists. And for me, like whenever journalists come and ask me about these questions or why you're doing this, I'm like, I'm doing this to keep myself safe. If I don't fight. Oops. Are the feds here already? Is this the Saudis? MBS, are you here? Are you here? I don't know. See, I'm being canceled all the time by tech. Anyway, so I'm like, for me, it's like, if I don't fight for someone who's different than me, if I don't fight for this, and I said the same for Palestinian journalists as well. So many people who were so vocal about Jamal's singular story about we need to protect journalists in the Middle East were silent completely about the record numbers of Palestinian journalists being killed. For me, their safety is my safety. Their safety is Mehdi's safety, your safety, and ultimately everyone else's. And so I wrote a piece for The Guardian saying the things that Jamal warned about the red lines of censorship that he used to face as an editor at a paper in Saudi. Now with what's happening at the Washington Post, where Bezos has imposed his own red lines. We were censored. People kept talking about, free market's personal enemies. Like, guys, a major newspaper got heavily censored. It's the first and sign of where things are going, right? And so for me, it's like, because I'm like, Jamal was right. 1 minute your country's okay, 1 minute you think you're free, and the next you're not. And I think it's a warning about not just America, so many countries, so many people who fled war where you think your lives are normal until they're not, right? And so I guess for me, it's also raising that alarm now. Jamal's murder and the cover-up was a warning signal for our own democracy in a lot of ways.
Now, Femi, as we've been talking about, we are literally seeing billionaires buy up our media institutions, our social media platforms. How do we, or can we, resist elite capture, not just of media, but of language and radical traditions?
I think resisting elite capture of language goes by way of resisting what you started off by saying, right? The elite capture of media. And elite capture of media is not this, subtle thing where rich people weigh in on how they'd like newspapers to be covered. I mean, that's certainly a version of billionaires wielding influence, but it's getting really overt, as Karen was just explaining, right? Billionaires are buying the platforms, they're buying the newspapers, they're censoring what can be said at these newspapers. They're putting Barry Weiss in charge of things, who explicitly is opposed to standards. So, I think a lot of it goes by way of the kind of thing Mehdi's been talking about, right? Do you have independent, billionaire-free media outlets? Do you defend other sources of knowledge and information that includes our science workers who, both in the government and in public universities? Do we defend all of these things? And I'm in particular optimistic about some of the worker-run news outlets. New York has a few, DC has some, the 51st just started, which covers DC. LA, Chicago, they all have various kinds of journalist-run, journalist-operated media outlets whose job it is to have actual relationships with people and report based on that, based on actual facts and actual accountability to the people that they're dispensing those facts to, as opposed to responsibility to Jeff Bezos or something. And I think that kind of institution, if we build it, if we support it, will go a long way. And, not for nothing, but places like these, where people can get together and talk, also, I think, things that we have to support. Busboys, Politics and Poets, Sankofa, right? Just to name some that are in DC. Places where people can gather and hash things out directly, not even mediated by even an independent kind of media operation. But all these places where we can decide for ourselves what's true, what's going on, and not have to run it by an algorithm that the richest people in the world get to manipulate.
Now, I want to dig a little bit deeper into language with you again, Femi, which is that Terms like capture or fight or resist, of course, can be viewed as militaristic in one way. How should the left be thinking about strategy? And are there blueprints that you think we can take from the civil rights movement or what you've studied and written about a lot, the Black radical tradition?
We should be thinking militaristically. This is a fight.
Are we going to be on the watch list now? Here we go.
Yeah. We need to stop bringing, debates to a gunfight. Right?
Oops, Mehdi.
No shade. A little shade. But like, these people are showing up in our neighborhoods in military gear, kidnapping people out of their cars. We're in a fight. We don't get to decide whether or not we're in a fight. We get to decide if we're gonna fight. And that's why I think, I've been pushing on, whether it's workers' unions or debtors' unions or renters' unions, something that can speak the language of coercion. Military doesn't have to mean shooting, right? But you do have to think in terms of political contest. It's not, am I going to persuade you to see my perspective? It's, can I stop you from doing the thing you want to do? Whether that's by turning off your energy, whether that's by, stopping the flow of dollars to you. That's what divestment and sanctions was for as a movement, right? Can we figure out how to, in the language of conflict, in the realm of conflict, take power away from our enemies and give power to the people? And I think those are exactly the terms we should be fighting on. And, there's obviously a role for argument and there's a role for debate, primarily in recruiting people to our side, right? But, it's going to have to come down to these people will not stop themselves. They have to be stopped. And that's the terms we have to engage on this struggle.
Now, Mehdi, you literally wrote a book on winning arguments and debate, so I would love your response to that.
We're about to debate.
I mean, I'm not going to debate. I'm going to agree. I agree. I've been shouting this for 10 years now. There is no compromising or conceding or meeting in the middle. You don't meet fascists in the middle. The alternative to fascism is not fascism light. And look, I did a debate this summer for the crazy surrounded folks at Jubilee, where 20 people in a circle, and like the second guy was like, I'm a fascist. I'm like, well, I'm not going to debate you. I don't debate fascists. And then they had to remove him from the chair, and then people booed me. I was like, why would I do that? So I agree. There's about 30% of the population of this country who cannot be persuaded or gotten through to or debated with. They are in a cult. They have cut themselves off from reality. They believe the 2020 election was stolen. They believe, vaccines are bad and climate change is fake and Donald Trump is a normal human being. And they have these weird beliefs, and I don't think we can get through to them. I just think it's a waste of time. And it's the reason I don't go on Fox. I get invited to go on Fox. I don't go on Fox. No point to doing that. I do agree that the purpose of debate, persuasion, argument is to recruit people to your side. It's for the undecided middle. It's a horrible phrase. I don't have a better one, but like the low information voter that political scientists talk about. America is filled with low information voters. Sorry to break it to you all. Most people are not in a Busboys talking about politics on a weekday evening. Most people are just trying to relax after a hard day's work, trying to chill out, trying to think of other things. We have an education system which unfortunately dumbs things down. We have a political system which dumbs things down. We have an entertainment system which dumbs things down. And therefore, that is what the people in power want, right? They want people distracted, not thinking about politics. So those are the people we're trying to persuade. Those are the people we're trying to get engaged and activated. And I totally agree with you about not avoiding things. Marty Baron, who was Karen's former boss, Pulitzer Prize winning editor of the Washington Post, he had this really dumb quote that people used to love, and I found it annoying as hell. In the first Trump term, he said, people said to him, oh, well, the president's declared war on the media. And he said, we're not at war, we're at work. And I was like, that's not how war works. If somebody's attacking you, you're at war, right? You just have to push back. You have to defend yourself. And this denialism of what is going on, the greatest enablers of Donald Trump are not the fascists who already love him. It's these kind of bland, milquetoast, centrist liberals who think if we just kind of, we just stick together for a bit longer, keep our heads down, stick to some norms, remind people of how amazing the American status quo is, we'll get through this. And that has failed time and time again. We know it's failed because Donald Trump is president again.
Can I just add, just real quick, just to your first point, which I also agree with, right? This idea that there's some 30% or some percentage of people that you can't reach. I didn't answer the other part of your question, which is how should we understand the civil rights movement? I think we should understand the civil rights movement as the defeat of this class of people, right? This 30% that's not gonna get on board with any version of progressivism. You know, they had to eat shit for a few decades, and that's what the anti-political correctness, that's what anti-wokeness is, right? These people realize that they have to burrow, yeah, exactly. They have to burrow under a hole and, you know, say please and thank you to black people or whatever pisses them off. And they had to pretend to get with the program the rest of us were on, and we confused that with, you know, permanent, genuine, progressive racial progress that couldn't move backwards, right? But no, it was just the defeat of this 30%, and we need to put them back where they were under wokeness.
Well, there's a clip that's going to be on Right Wing Media. Go for it.
I mean,
Exactly.
one thing I would say, I mean, and this is part of what I teach in the class, and part of the reason why I wanted to do the class is like even fundamentally back to media. For a long time in this country, this media has functioned to maintain like this racial caste system. And actually, is he here? Joseph Torres. Yes. News for All the People, The Epic Story of Race in Media. I highly suggest everyone get that book because it tells this story that for the majority of the time in this country, the media has been owned by oligarchs and billionaires and rich folks and has actively kept people like us in this panel out of the media. And I feel like we're returning to the status quo, to this factory settings of what the media in this country kind of always has been, right? We learn about how these media houses actively sent out mobs to go kill Chinese people, Black people, white allies, abolitionists. So it wasn't just, as we said, they were part of the offensive. They were part of the war against especially non-white folks in this country. And so now we're seeing a return to that form, right?
But one thing we should bear in mind is I hear a lot of people say independent journalism, and this might sound strange coming from me since I'm now an independent journalist, but I hear people going, independent journalism, it's the future, it's going to save us. And it's like, not quite, because guess what? The other side get to be in the independent journalist space as well. And they're doing some serious damage in that space. Not just the Barry Weiss and the Free Presses, which are then acquired for a ludicrous $150 million. But like, you look at someone like Megyn Kelly, who's come out of corporate media, came out of Fox, came out of NBC.
Right.
And she's very successful now as an independent journalist. She just did a whole rant this week about how she wants to see people in the Caribbean not just killed, but she wants their limbs to be destroyed. And she wants them tortured to death by American bombs. That's the kind of rhetoric that millions of Americans are still absorbing, even if it's not from traditional cable or nightly news, but it is from their YouTube and their social media. So I'm always loath to suddenly think that independent journalism in and of itself is a panacea or silver bullet. It's how we build that independent media. It's how we try and dominate that independent media. It's how we try and get numbers to that independent media. Because
money, resources.
But that's also why we have to look at it militarily, right? Like,
Baby's trying to move up all the watch lists.
But just to your point, right? It's an arms race, right? Like they got theirs, we have to have ours, and if they have more than us, then we have to have more than them. You know, like it's really.
But we also need to educate people as we go, right? Because one thing I feel very frustrated about is the lack of media literacy in this country amongst young and old. So my big worry, and people in this room may disagree, is you have people saying, all right, I'm checked out of CNN, and I'm checked out of the New York Times. They've lied to me about Gaza. They've lied to me about this and that. And then they go to the warm embrace of a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens. And I'm seeing that happening all the time. And that's another reason why I set up Zeteo, because let's have independent media, but let's have independent media with facts. with standards, with principles, with progressive goals, with marginalized voices. Let's not just replicate what we already had in corporate media, independent media, under a different name, and then trick people by avoiding left and right labels and saying, well, we're all anti the system, we're all anti the mainstream media, we're all independent. No, I don't have that much in common with Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, despite them being a bit better on Israel these days. I do worry that because of the lack of media literacy, people think mainstream media all bad, independent media all good, and that's too simplistic as well. It's actually a dangerous road to go down.
One reason why I was really excited to do this panel and to truly learn from all of you myself is because I am in this transition phase, right? And you were talking about MSNBC, of course, we're talking about Washington Post and Columbia, and I'm still in the grieving phase of the loss of my position in what felt like a very influential position and a powerful position. And our ethos at Team Vogue was very similar to all of yours, which was about uplifting and elevating marginalized voices, of course, young voices across the board. But I would love to hear a little bit more from you and all of you, having either been in that space and now you're not in that space or gone through this process yourself. Just how should I or other people in my position be thinking about this transition? Or do you have any advice?
I would just, again, commiserate. I think I wrote this on my Substack. There are so many people who would pat me on the back and just be like, it's a badge of honor that you're no longer with them. And no, this sucks. It sucks. It sucks to lose your job. Also, those folks, it sucks, health insurance, all these things matter, right? And so I think a lot about building while grieving, even while I was teaching RSS, teaching, the 500 students, 600 students, I was still grieving a lot. But one thing I would say, and that's exactly part of the reason why I wanted to do this, is because it helped me not to feel powerless. And then one thing, because I was just feeling super powerless, and one thing I guess I would say for you if I had advice is it's okay to grieve it. Don't let people tell you how to feel about the great work that you did. And I also feel this as an editor. I felt for the voices that I could no longer bring to the mainstream. When writers would tell me, gosh, you gave this story a chance, that story a chance, no one else, was published. I'm especially for editors, it's the voices that we were able to platform, you're thinking, where are they gonna go?
Exactly.
Right.
And especially for young writers, right? One of our favorite things at Team Vogue was being the people who gave authors or writers their first bylines, right? And that was a mainstream publication that would then allow them to go on to write for other outlets, more established. But Mehdi, I'll throw it to you.
I don't want to sound too cliched, and I agree with what Karen says. It's obviously, as human beings, we shouldn't pretend, when we take a blow or when we take a hit. But we don't want to sound cliched. For me, our lives on this planet are not about being knocked down, it's about getting up, right? And for me, I've been knocked down a few times in my life on both sides of the Atlantic. The big one was obviously losing my MSNBC shows. I remember that day. My shows were canceled the morning after I'd just done the Daily Show in New York, and I'd come back late that night on a big high, and then in the morning my shows were canceled. And I remember being so upset. My wife and I, we went to a coffee shop in Tyson's and switched off our phones that were blowing up. And I said to my wife recently, I said, do you remember we went and did that? And we were so upset. And in hindsight, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, without a shadow of a doubt. I have zero regrets, and I can say with a completely clear conscience, without a shadow of a doubt, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, if MSNBC, or what's now called MS Now, came back to me and said, hey, you can have your shows back, I would say thanks, but no thanks, or maybe other colorful language. But my point being, where we are in a space now, and I know I'm a little bit ahead of you in the timeline than Karen, and then Karen is ahead of you in version, is you can get to another place quickly. The beauty of this country. I saw, who was I see? Oh, good old Chris Cuomo, man, who was canned from cable news. He was complaining on a podcast that AOC and the left never praise America, right? Let me praise America as an immigrant to this great country. One of the great things about this country is the capacity for reinvention. The capacity for being able to lose a job and get another job, lose a business, start another business, get knocked down, stand up again. And for me, I have no doubt, Versha, that you have your there's way better stuff to come from you than we've even seen already in the Teen Vogue space. Independent media, mainstream media, you are going to look back and say, like I am, and I'm sure Karen will, is that this is the best thing that ever happened because I have more freedom now than I've ever had. I have more impact now. I mean, you talked about Teen Vogue and you talked about Washington Post. I used to think the same thing. Oh, at MS, I was the guy who could bring in left-wing voices. Like, if I do nothing in my life ever again, I can die happy knowing that Noam Chomsky emailed me and said, in 25 years of MSNBC, you're the only person who invited me onto MSNBC, right? I had Chomsky on air. I had Palestinian voices on air who didn't get platforms. I felt bad when I left. I thought that's not going to happen now. But we have other platforms, and now we have other impact. And now I get stopped by people in the street who say, I subscribe to Zateo, I follow Zateo, love that interview you did. We have found different ways to get our messages across to the 70% of people we think we can persuade and win over to our goal. So that's why I would say to you, I would say, look forward, don't look back.
Thank you. That is fantastic advice. So we're talking about platforms, right? Independent platforms, social media platforms. Femi, we have a lot of quote unquote influencers today as well. Another thing young people are obsessed with is being creators as a career. So what should the role of philosophers be in this current social media moment?
Are you on TikTok? I'm not on TikTok.
You're on Blue Sky. You're Blue Sky.
I'm on Blue Sky. Maybe I should be on TikTok. I don't know. But somebody should be on these platforms. You know, a thing that's strange about philosophy as a discipline, particularly the kind of philosophy that I do, is the political philosophy, right? It has this well-earned reputation as being, you know, elitist and far removed from world struggles. But if you think about what political philosophy is for, it's now, right? It's exactly this, right? The stakes of politics going the wrong way is exactly what we're seeing in the streets. And if there's any reason ever to study political philosophy, it's to address this kind of political situations, to address, you know, when history takes this kind of turn and the stakes of having the wrong sort of government or the wrong sort of laws or the wrong conception of justice is not just, you know, writing an embarrassing article in some journal no one reads, but is actually the machines and gears of a real justice system going this way rather than that way. So, you know, if you ask me, you know, philosophers should just be in it with everybody else, right? You know, philosophers should be giving their perspectives. You know, it would help if we worked on better ones than we currently have. But you know, I think participating in actual political struggle would go some distance to, you know, showing people what political ideas are important in a particular time, right? Just to give one specific example, you know, I'm not a legal expert, but my understanding is that it's illegal to try to overthrow the government. And people tried that here and not a lot happened. And a guy by the name of Jair Bolsonaro tried that in Brazil and is in lockup. And one, I think that's dope. I just think that's great. But number two, you know, just why, right? Why did, you know, what's going on with their constitution or their political culture or their, you know, the particular kind of people that they empower in their judicial system or all of the above that explains why that went that way and our system went this way? Though that's a question political theorists, political philosophers should be asking. You know, we have at least some tools to participate productively and constructively in a public discussion about that. And we might want to start, you know, whatever the answer is, we might want to start working on that here so we don't get, you know, a repeat of the events of January 6th or a repeat of this kind of regime.
All right, I've got just 2 more questions, and then we're going to open this up to audience questions. So please get them ready for this brilliant panel. What does leadership in this moment look like? Mehdi, I'll start with you. How did you organize and build teams to come together?
Oh, that's a big question. For me, are you talking about me personally or talking about in this moment?
Yes, both.
Well, in this moment, I want to do a shout out to Zoran Mamdani, who showed us what leadership looked like in New York and gave us a chink of light in all of this darkness, and then came to the city and made Donald Trump look at him in a way that I've never seen Donald Trump look at Melania Trump. I don't think Melania's ever had Donald look at her in the way that Zoran had Donald look at her. So that's a different type of leadership.
And power.
He's got that smile, Zoran. He's that. See, I've got RAMF, right? I've got resting angry Muslim face. Zoran does not. He has a very charming Muslim face. So he can do that. Anyway, I digress. In terms of building Zeteo and what I've done, I've never run a company in my life. I've never run anything in my life. I was barely even freelance. I've always been in the warm bosom of corporate media, and I've never really done, friends of mine were like, you can't run a bath. How are you going to run a business? Just go be an independent journalist on your own. Why do you have to set up a company? Why do you have to hire people? It's a lot of responsibility, and it is, right? We have a team of over 20 people now. A lot of people left great jobs to come work. We just had Swin Soupsang and Andrew Perez leave Rolling Stone and come join our political team. Great vote of confidence in where Zeteo is going. For me, it is about leading by example, really. It's not like, I'm not there to, lay out 20-point plans or, I'm not the Chinese Communist Party. I don't have a 5-year plan, and I don't give rousing speeches in the morning. But I do try and rally people around the idea of what is good journalism. What questions are to be asked? What ideas do you have? What voices do you want to elevate? And I hope that is how I show leadership as the head of Zeteo, is to say, this is what I'm doing. What are you all doing? Are we all rowing in the same direction towards the same goals in terms of exposing injustice and corruption and challenging the people in power? Because that's what journalism is all about. If you're not doing that, you're not really doing journalism. So for me, and to go back to what Karen said earlier, I've cherished the experiences I've had in mainstream media, at the BBC, at Al Jazeera, at NBC, at The Intercept, at The Guardian, at Sky. All of those experiences over the years have made me who I am. And I'm trying to bring some of that and filter out the shit that I got along the way and take the good and build on that. And I think for me, it's really, if I'm not doing my job, then I can't expect anyone else to be doing their job. So really, it's about trying to lead by example in my specific situation.
Can I add to that?
Yeah. For me, as I said before, I think as a journalist and now, I guess, a rogue radical professor and educator, this was only my 3rd time teaching ever. So going from a class of maybe 20 people to teaching over 1,000 online and in person. I think for me, in terms of leadership, and I know we're talking about like the resistance and things are dangerous and all those things are true, fighting back, military, yes, but for me, I just was like, I love this. What can I, in this time, sometimes it might seem a little cliche, but I take a lot of joy and pleasure in learning new things with people. I'm sure some of my students are here. I see you, Jess. She was in the video. She's wearing the shirt. Oh my gosh, yes. Some of my RSS students flew in tonight just to be here. I guess for me, I first of all, I think in general, I have fuck you energy to like when people tell me that I can't do stuff, I'm like, oh, really? Okay, let's do this. And I think for me, I tend to think very simplistically in the essence of this. For me, it's a joy to like come across something in history that we did not know and we should have known. For me, the impetus to build this again was, the anecdote is actually back to the failures of mainstream media. If folks remember, there's a lot of, this is back in 2015 when people were challenging Woodrow Wilson's name being put on monuments and the Princeton School of International Affairs. And there's a lot being written about Woodrow Wilson's but rather resegregating the federal workforce. So in the research that I was doing to, add to the discourse on that, I found that Woodrow Wilson also was part of, developing the League of Nations, right? Everyone knows the League of Nations, model UN students. Oh, AP World History folks, yes, League of Nations, which preceded the United Nations. And in that formation, Japan was the country that came to the League of Nations and said, hey, we need a racial equality proposal. The Japanese government had been seeing how Japanese were being treated in the United States and Canada and Australia, and Japan came with this racial equality proposal, and it was rejected by Woodrow Wilson, the British, and all that. And there are historians who argue that that humiliation at the League of Nations is what led Japan to become more militaristic, more imperialistic, more violent in its own neighborhood, and then eventually a trajectory into which it withdraws from the League of Nations and attacks us. Anyway, long story short, is when I found that out, like the visceral, like, what? I didn't know this as a journalist. I didn't know this as an international affairs student. And just that impulse for me to be like, I need everyone else to know this. I need to share this. That's how I start out the class, is with race, media, international affairs. I speak about this example, and like I talk to a lot of the students about the, it brings up a lot of, wait, we were lied to, so it brings up a lot of anger. So it's like, fuck y'all, we're gonna learn more stuff that we didn't learn. So there's a lot of, I think for me, it's like leadership is allowing people, giving people that container and that permission to be like, not only angry, but also maybe some shame about what we didn't know collectively. And I tell everyone, like, we are all in this together. We have all been lied to. We have all gotten propagandized beyond belief. It doesn't matter how many political philosophy degrees we've had or how many PhDs, we've all been immersed in lies and erasure. And so for me, it's been a joy to be in this, to lead the class. And I tell people my only job is just to expose you to, if you're learning about Chinese Exclusion Act and learning about the pogroms, the racial pogroms, the genocidal violence that was enacted on Chinatowns across the country, that in a lot of ways is a pretext for what we're seeing with ICE right now. And it also, for me, I enjoy breaking people's preconceived notions of how we should think of things, right? That we see ICE as a Latino immigration issue, when I'm like, actually, let me reframe. This also affects the Asian American community. There is pretext here in the Asian American community. So for me, I enjoy that. And I think that's part of that's how you have the strength to keep going. I think maybe my students see the passion, I suppose, in that. And I realize that if you don't find some sort of joy and pleasure in modeling that, then yes, going to war is not fun. It's not. But for me, it's modeling not only fuck you energy, but having fun while doing that. And like I said, I said this on Blue Sky, it's fun to learn band things. Like I said, they can make it, it's kind of sexy, forbidden knowledge. Apparently learning about Black people is forbidden knowledge. So we're gonna make it fun to do so. And we're gonna continue to do it anyway. So I enjoy it. And so I enjoy kind of like cultivating that spirit of
That makes sense. Femi, what do you see as leadership in academia in this moment being, or if you want to comment on these things we're talking about in community or in general right now?
Leadership in academia. Shout out to AAUP. A lot of the academics who've been organizing, it was the academics who are organizing around faculty interests in AAUP who, in the University of California systems, challenged the Trump administration. It was not UCLA. So, organized workers, that's the kind of leadership I'm down with. And a great example of that, also from California, David Huerta, who was president in SEIU, Service Employees International Union, arrested in, defending immigrant neighbors, and he, alongside the union, mobilized and rolled out, not just in response to his arrest, but in response to all the arrests, right? But he wasn't above, even as a president, going out and putting the shift work in, going out and participating personally in a defense. And honestly, just for me personally, that's the kind of ethos I am trying to cultivate in myself and the people around me. Maybe I feel like it's a side effect of getting older, but I'm just like a little more curmudgeonly these days. Like, I get on Instagram and TikTok and I'm like, there's too many fucking leaders. Like, some of y'all need to show up and grab a picket sign. And I very much include myself in that. So, like, I think the cool thing to do is to be rank and file. I think the cool thing to do is put in your shift, grab a whistle, circle a block, whistle if you see ice, and just like participate, just be part of something. Like, that's enough.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my final question for now before we do audience Q&A, so maybe we can do this a little quickly. It might be a little cheesy, but I think people will appreciate this. What is giving you hope right now?
What
is giving you hope right now in this age of doom scrolling?
Honestly, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but like seeing a huge crowd of people, chase federal agents outside a building in New York, that's given me a lot of hope. We can't do this, we are doing this. I like that. But I just want to add, because this is, I feel just as happy and tender about this. Watching the floundering of this regime is unbelievable. Watching the president sleep through 7 minutes of a press briefing, these guys look cooked. Like, they don't have it. Like, they don't have the juice to do a 1,000-year Reich. They're gonna be lucky to make it to 1,000 days. These guys are on the way out. We're gonna sweep them out of history, and that's what gives me hope. They're not up to the task. And yes.
Since we're repeating answers, I'm gonna say New York, right? What happened in New York was huge. You had a guy who ran as a socialist who called what was happening in Israel and Gaza a genocide. They threw tens of millions of dollars at him, and he still won. And I think that was a really hopeful moment. I don't think people quite realize how momentous that was for American and global politics. I've just been abroad. Wherever you go in the world, people are asking about what happened in New York. How did he win in New York? I mean, it's very, I know we've now taken it for granted, but it was almost against all odds. He was at 1% in the polls in December 2024 when I first interviewed him. And that is a huge transformation. I think politics is changing. I know people want to say, oh, it's just New York. It's not replicable. Actually, there's a poll out today that has Graham Plattner in Maine up 20 points over his opponent. So this is not just happening in New York. There are populist progressive voices all over the country. I always think of Mamdani. Mamdani is everything that the right said Obama was, but wasn't. He is literally a socialist Muslim from Africa. And he won. So that gives me hope.
He won in the same city that elected Eric Adams as well, and that is my city, so I can.
Eric Adams is busy being mayor of Tel Aviv.
Exactly. I'll throw in my quick thing that gives me hope, because we're talking about Mamdani, which is that after Mamdani won his primary, there's this great organization, if you're not familiar, called Run for Something, that is all about encouraging young people to run for office at all levels, from local school boards to Congress, and 10,000 people signed up to run for office after Mamdani's primary win, which is record-breaking for them. And since, I think, after he won the general, like some 2,000 have signed up. So it's really incredible, the work that they're doing, and that's just one of many organizations. So Karen, your turn.
Okay, well, am I gonna be cheesy and say what gives me hope? It's nights like tonight, to be honest. People who are braving the cold, the elements, who come and show up to hear, to learn, to connect, to listen. I'm heartened by, I guess I mean, kind of to Femi's point, I mean, shout out to the Washington Post guilds and unions. They've been fighting on my behalf, protesting on my behalf at the Washington Post. I know, Condé Nast, seeing like journalism organizations like beginning to, rise up. That has given me a lot of hope. I just saw that there's now a new sort of journalist initiative to stop the spread of AI in journalism and push, I think it's called something like Stop the Slop, so, and that's a whole other conversation about, people and AI and all that, but it's like we're starting to see definitely like courage is contagious, and there are times I think in the left we're so used to being beat down that these wins are so important. Like, so to not listen to people who say, Mom, that he didn't win a commanding, it's not a mandate, right? And it's like, actually, as Mehdi, is saying, it's like, I was just in New York, the hope and the fight that people have. They're like, all right, we in this. And like Femi said, the other side, they don't got it. They don't got it. Like liver shot. But I think people are starting to come together and to I think it's the people power, really.
Can I just make one quick point?
Yes.
To the thing you were saying in the middle there, companies spend incredible amounts of money, sometimes millions of dollars, to stop little shops from unionizing, right? Starbucks paying consultants millions of dollars to prevent, little shops of like 7 baristas from unionizing. It's not because they think their profit margins depend on that one shop. It's because no matter what they pretend when they tell us, oh, Mandani, that doesn't mean anything. No matter what they pretend when they tell us, oh, this union fighting against AI slop, that doesn't mean anything. They actually know how this works. They know that as soon as we see that one victory over there could mean we could unionize over here, or we could fight AI slop over here, all of us are gonna count how many of us there are and how many of them there are. And we're going to realize we can more of us than there are of them. Exactly. And we're going to realize that we could do exactly this kind of thing in cities other than New York, and in shops other than that one Starbucks shop. And that's how we win.
That's how we win.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been a brilliant discussion already, but I'm sure we've also got some wonderful questions from the audience. I am not actually positive. Do we have a microphone to pass around, or? Somebody's got a microphone. Here we go. Okay, we've got a question. Let's go right here. I saw this gentleman in the beanie raise his hand first.
Right there?
Oh, right there, sorry. Right.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you all. I've been taking notes the whole time. But Mehdi, thank you. Mehdi, thank you for crushing the 20-1. That was great. And I look forward to taking your series and reading your book, sir. Hold on, notes. Okay, just a few words on celebration of anti-woke, like how they celebrate it. Just a couple of words on the irony of that.
Couple of words on the irony of celebrating anti-woke. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, they wanted to purge us. It's been very clear with this regime. It's controversial when I said we're in an overtly segregationist regime, right? It's no surprise that their first attacks were against DEI. And I've said this in my work, that particularly when it comes to people of color, internationalist solidarity, whether it's Black Palestinian solidarity, Black Muslim solidarity, Black Jewish, like that has consistently been attacked. Even when we're talking about the Amazon unionizing, Chris Smalls going over to as part of the Gaza flotilla. Like part of it is they want to break us, and particularly the global majority, there are more of us than them, and that scares them, right? Because we're also able to see the fact that the police departments that are being trained by Israeli forces that sort of thing. AI data centers that are being put in Black and brown neighborhoods, that sort of thing. We're able to see like that we need to stop this in our community, to stop this in the center of empire as we're sitting here in Washington, D.C., so that we can sort of help protect the world from Americans' cruelty in a way. That's how I see it, that there's always been a deliberate effort. They call it woke, whatever they want to call it, but it's ultimately trying to break groups of people, particularly non-white people, marginalized people, especially from connecting with one another, which is why I really wanted to have this type of a makeup of a panel, because we are often the canaries in the coal mine for what eventually happens to everyone else, right? Remember Joy Reid, Tiffany Cross, Melissa Harris Perry. Where was the outrage then? And now here we are all of a sudden. Oh my goodness, Black women.
It's been happening.
It's been done happening, right? So part of this is they don't want us to speak about that because we're able to mobilize, right? Whether it's anti-apartheid movements, civil rights movements, they know our power, which is why they're trying to.
But it's also, I mean, let's just be very honest. When they say woke and they say DEI, they mean the N-word.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just be very clear.
Right.
This is their version of being able to get away with not being able to say what they said before. And you know that, you see that when they complain about like the American Girl doll is not white enough. Like that's just wanting to say the N-word, but hiding behind DEI. They don't even know what DEI stands for, what it actually means in practice. They don't know what, they couldn't define woke if their life depended on it. You've seen right-wing pundits being asked and then they flounder on TV. One example I always give is Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire, who did an entire monologue on how you couldn't have a black actress in Little Mermaid because technically at that depth of water, he said, you would have to have translucent skin to be a mermaid. That was his scientific explanation for why he was opposed to a black actress being a mermaid. It's a fucking mermaid, man. There's no science. But that is the desperation with which they want to find other ways of saying the N-word.
Right. And to that end, like in part of, in part of what I think about this, like, and I sort of deeply think about what did Toni Morrison say, the purpose of racism is distraction, right? So sometimes I think a lot about like, oh my gosh, okay, the Matt Walshes of the world saying dumbass shit. And then it's like, then, my job in the mainstream media was like, well, let's do a rebuttal. And I'm going to talk about, Mami Wata spirits from African diaspora culture. We've always had mermaids in West African culture, but it's still a reaction to their racist violence. So I think so much about like how much energy we are spending and wasting reacting to this anti-woke nonsense. Whatever, Matt Walsh is a dumbass.
I'll just add real quick. Back when there was when people were at least pretending that there were principles behind this, back then the story was the opposition to wokeness is a defense of meritocracy, right? But almost the very first executive order, I believe it was in the first 7 days of the Trump administration, his way of following through on anti-wokeness was an executive order reversing the anti-discrimination provisions that had been established by previous executive order, which, by the way, only happened because activists, Black labor rights activists, A. Philip Randolph and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters threatened what would have been the original March on Washington if there wasn't comprehensive federal anti-discrimination protections enshrined by executive order. So that whole saga, I think, encapsulates in a little bow what anti-wokeness is really about, which is, not meritocracy, but return to overt racism and cronyism, which was the world before anti-discrimination protections.
We have somebody over here. How many more questions do we want to take? Just want to sort of gauge the room so we can.
I think we have 20 minutes. We can go to.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes. All right,
five.
so we're going to go here. Then I'm going to go to that side of the room.
Okay, perfect.
And we can take a bachelor. Thank you all so much again for being here. My name is Annie. Used to work at State Department. Now am figuring out my way. So thank you all for your advice on that. I would say my favorite people in the world, besides for medical professionals, are journalists and librarians. So buy a book in the back if you weren't already considering it. And my question has to do with language. I'm very curious. It sounds like language that may be overused and or really not understood is something like DEI or even wokeness, right? And so I'm curious from you all, what language do you think is critically missing in this moment that you think should be used more because it can expand people's understanding and awareness? I ask this question especially because Isabel Wilkerson's cast changed my life, and it just makes me see the world differently and the United States and how transatlantic partnerships can be different and evolve. And so I'm curious that language, a word, a phrase that you think should enter into the mainstream more because it does a better job of encompassing what we're lacking. Thank you.
An example for that.
Great question. Thank you.
Super quickly, this question of language came up in my class when we were discussing ICE rates, and particularly considering that the Supreme Court has basically greenlit the ability for people to be targeted based on skin color, right? So I remember posing to the class, I'm like, all right, we call it ICE raids, kidnappings. I'm like, is this not ethnic cleansing overtly? Why can't we or shouldn't we use this? You say ICE, why are they not ethnic cleansers? There's some back and forth in the class. Some people saying well, cleansing implies that people of color are unclean. But even just posing that, what if our coverage used those terms, right? So that's just a quick question. I'm of the type that I would say that because I think effectively that is what is happening. So just a quick example of that.
Something I've noticed you use as well is purging from these institutions. And I think that has not become a mainstream word that a lot of people are using yet, but it's 100% what's happening, right? Mehdi or Femi, anything you want to add to that?
Just to add to Karen, the language around the ICE stuff is very important because it's very easy to fall into government-approved language and right-wing coding. These are kidnappings. Even when we talked, in the first Trump term, we had this horrible phrase, child separation. They were kidnapping kids at the border, putting them in cages, deporting them, and it was like child separation, so kind of surgical language to use it as if it's some kind of, we need to push back against that stuff all the time. Even deportations, the phrase deportation, I've seen the phrase used American children with undocumented parents have been deported. Well, by definition, you can't deport an American. So even that language doesn't even make sense. So I do think we have to push back heavily. And again, that in the independent media space, we are able to do that. And I think that's important because, again, the way that Trump and this regime get away with what they do is because they hide it behind all of this language. And you go back and you look at people like Frank Luntz and conservative strategists 20 years ago, were talking very openly about how you mask what you're actually up to in liberal sounding language.
All right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, to be the annoying academic, I do think some jargon or some specialized language around different kinds of authoritarianism would help, because I think we get caught up in branding what the people on the right want to achieve and what their goals in politics are, and we confuse that with what they actually have achieved, right? So political scientists talk about things like competitive authoritarianism, and they have all these distinctions to talk about what it is that the authoritarians have actually won, and the more we can talk, in a specific and advanced and granular way about that, the better. So that's something I would add. But I also think, we could stand to subtract some words. When I was a kid, only Black people used the term woke, and frankly, that was better. Everything that's happened since has been poor. So, if we just deleted that from the common political lexicon, well, I don't know if we can.
We've got a question back here.
Yeah, and one other word, if I could throw in, is the word intersectionality has gotten a little overused, and I think a lot of people don't really understand exactly what it means. And somebody suggested to change it to interconnectedness, because that's what really needs to happen. All right, we have somebody asking a question here.
Keep it close to your mouth. Okay. TikTok Live, especially, has become a platform for real-time influence and debates, but also sometimes misinformation. How do you think journalists and like live debaters should approach verifying content in a space where news spreads instantly and without traditional gatekeeping?
Cite your sources.
I mean, that's a great question. It's the stuff that keeps me up at night, to be honest. Every debate we have about politics, culture, everything we've talked about today, and Karen and Femi have both made historical references. The problem is, and I know everyone says this in every generation, but we are in a very unique moment now that we have not seen before in our history, which is that in the old days, you know, there was a pendulum that swung. If you went left, you went right. If you went right, after a while, you'd go left. Today, we live in this age where, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you can actually isolate yourself off from the quote-unquote reality-based universe, depending on what algorithms you're seeing, who you're following on social media. And to go back, you know, there are some people I will never reach because they will never see anything I write or say because they will be in their cocoon of Matt Walsh and whoever else, God help us. So when you talk about TikTok and just forget the people we can't reach, because I can't do anything about big tech and the algorithms right now in the short term. But in terms of the medium to long term, I do think media literacy is so important. And I'm not just for young people, by the way. It's the old folks on Facebook who actually need a lot of help, too. With the greatest respect to people in this room who may be old folks on Facebook. But given the old folks are not in school, at least for the folks who are in school, I would like to see public education system take this very seriously in terms of media literacy. I go to places where people will show me all sorts of shit online and say, why aren't you covering this? And I'm like, it's not true. And just the first obvious step of media literacy is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't true. But in terms of fact checking, yes, I would urge you all in an age of misinformation and disinformation, not just right-wingers sharing disinformation, but people on quote-unquote our own side doing it for grift, for clicks. There are a lot of liberal leftists who are just trying to make money from attention. And I think that is really important, that you cite your sources, that you're able to double check opinions. If stuff sounds crazy, maybe it is, maybe you need to double check it. Maybe you need to understand what are reliable sources to begin with. I mean, this is a real problem. When people of my generation or older than me were growing up, it's like, okay, it's New York Times, it's BBC, it's whatever. Now, nobody trusts those brands for good reasons and bad. But then who do you trust? To go back to what I said earlier, doesn't mean you just blindly trust whoever you see on TikTok or Instagram. Now, we have bigger issues with TikTok, which is that David Ellison is about to be running TikTok soon. Barry Weiss is going to be running TikTok soon. So we have major issues there on the TikTok front. Again, no short-term solutions, but please, folks, do check your sources. Don't blindly believe what anyone tells you. The same skepticism you have for the anchor on CNN, have that same skepticism for the influencer on TikTok, please.
I want to recommend the News Literacy Project. If you're not familiar with them, they do really great work in this space, so they're a great one to support as well.
Obviously, subscribe to Zateo.
Also, shame. You talk about this a lot on Blue Sky. Shame people who bring back shame.
Bring back shame.
Bring back shame people who like do bullshit.
How do you shame the shameless? Is the great question of our time. Sure. Like, how do you shame Ted Cruz?
But I mean, like the influencers, right? Like the folks, even on our side, right? If we're talking about military, we need a bit of discipline, right? We cannot afford to have people not believe our quote unquote side. Again, it goes into like, does the left infight too much, blah, blah, blah. But
we're in an age of conspiracy theories.
Right.
And I spent my life pushing back against conspiracy theories in Muslim communities, on the left. And yet, Donald Trump in 2025 has made even me a conspiracy theorist on many issues. Like, it's really hard not to want to believe conspiracies. Like, Epstein. Epstein. I spoke years ago, Epstein is QAnon, all such exaggerated bullshit. Now I'm like, what the F is in those files? What did Donald Trump do?
Right.
Oh, we've got a question right here. Hi, yeah, I agree. We should bring back shame. I'm going to introduce myself first. Hi, my name is Jess. I am the founder of a local anti-displacement, anti-gentrification nonprofit. My educational background is in economics, but at my core, I'm a musician. I perform around the city with my bands, and also I am a grassroots community organizer. So my point of influence and accountability is directly to my community, like the people in my neighborhood and the people around me, making sure that the aunties and the uncles in our community are doing okay. So what I'm trying to say is I I'm not going to start a successful media company that amasses millions of followers or write a groundbreaking philosophical critique on the co-optation of radical ideology or launch a successful career independently that thinks about alternative ways for education. But what I do have is a really strong idea of the pulse of the city. And from the perspective of someone on the ground who is a community organizer and just a community member, like many people in this room are, what can we do to create new ways of thinking or systems that are disruptive to the mainstream, but simultaneously healing to our communities?
That's a big question. I think you should go first.
First of all, it sounds like you're doing it already.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Honestly, that's the first thing that occurs to me to say. I guess the only other thing I would add to what you're already doing, working in your neighborhood with the people around you, performing as a musician, both of those, whether it's the neighborhood meeting or your shows, those are audiences, right? And I think a thing you might think about is who else in the city is trying to reach audiences, whether it's other neighborhoods, whether it's the mutual aid, the ward-based mutual aids that we have here, and how you can use the fact that you are networked with all these people to be an information conduit. It's not just the people that go out and do the journalism, but somebody has to tell people, hey, this article applies to us in this neighborhood. Have you checked it out? Can we have a reading group and talk about it? Or can we plan, what we're gonna do about the fact that Pepco is obviously fucking with us, or whatever it is, right? So yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh, I have, I think from a very, very practical standpoint of the hows of it is, again, back to discipline. I mean, showing up like regularly and consistently, even if, like I said, I mean, you and I have talked about this. I mean, even, the Black Panthers setting up free school lunches, how that was probably more politically powerful than some of the stuff we hear about, like the outward, resistance. But when you mentioned healing, and that struck me a lot, art is healing right now. The artists, y'all are going to save us in so many ways. Those who have the ability to think outside of these systems and expand our imaginations. Not all of us are going to be frontline soldiers. That's just also not how armies work. You need the doctors. You need someone in my class talked about but if you gather people like that, you're just preaching to the choir. And I'm like, yeah, but the choir needs to keep singing. So keeping that morale up is part of, in a lot of ways, thinking of the almost militaristic discipline of it. Just for me, with the RSS and the students, it's all right, every Monday and Wednesday, we're showing up, regular appointed time, we're showing up. Y'all kept showing up, and even building that habit of consistency, building up that muscle in that way is a very practical way of just saying, hey, I'm here, right? So yeah, I think a lot of this is habits of us practicing showing up for one another on a regular basis.
All right, let's try to do 2 more questions. We've got one back here.
I think we have time for 2 more, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, one over here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen. Thank you so much for being here. I run a nonprofit called Consult Your Community, and we mobilize college students in 28 universities to give free help for immigrant, women, and minority-owned small businesses. I have a pulse on what's happening on college campuses right now from that vantage point, and there's a palpable loss of hope and fear. And one theme from this panel has been the different ways that all of you have been hard launched into your new chapters of freedom. So for people who are earlier in their careers and feel like they don't have that license or history or experience to have courage, what would you recommend to them, and how would you advise them in their first jobs out of college?
That's a tough one.
I graduated in 2000, and I had a very conventional media career for at least the first 10 years of my career, or 8 years of my career. I always look back on my career and I think, is there things I would have done differently? Are there other choices I would have made? And even when things went badly and I lost a job and found another job, in hindsight, looking back, I'm glad at the trajectory my career went on, because all of those things taught me stuff along the way. And I think for young people starting out right now, there is I think I'm the father of 2 kids, so I say this from personal experience, there is a sense of everything has to happen now, right? And I get that, and I was in that place as well. But I think we need to also teach ourselves, and those of us who are parents, teach our children the importance of the long game and of having patience and of being strategic and savvy, because yes, a few people will do everything in their 20s, but most people won't. And I think we have to, keep sight of that psychologically so that we don't lose hope, don't get beaten down by the system, but also so that we're always learning, right? Everything that's happening to us is an experience that we're banking, that we're putting in our pocket, that we're putting in our back pocket for a day that's going to come where it's going to be useful. So I think it's really important to kind of understand strategically what it is you want to do. What is your long-term plan? I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I said earlier, I've never had long-term plans. But I remember when I got married, my wife said, where are you going to be in 5 years? I said, I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 weeks. You may have married the wrong guy, right? But I recognize that is the way we need to be in this chaotic environment. And in terms of hope, I think that for young people and people starting out, I do think those of us who are older do have to act as role models and advisors and mentors, because we have to show them that, you're not, every generation thinks they're the first generation that's going through something. And I think that's something else important we have to talk about. But for me, it is a sense of having that long-term goal, having that clear goal, working towards something. And even if it means you're taking diversions, even if it's not a straight line. I mean, my career went all over the place. 10 years ago, I moved to the US. I never imagined I'd be living and working in the US today. Nor did I imagine the guy from Home Alone 2 would be president, but there you go. So I do think you have to have some kind of goal, but understand that you're not going to get there in some linear, clean way.
Just quickly, I'll say, I think celebrating incremental wins is really important.
100%.
And so, those local wins that we're talking about, or local college campus or university wins, whatever it might be. And I think, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
I would quickly say, back to my point, I mean, I was learning from the Columbia students. I was in awe of what they were doing in the encampments. Those encampments were ground zero for launching, the media doesn't like to admit this, but the largest global student protest movement in decades. That was from the students. There's a reason why they came after you guys so hard.
But Karen, 100% I agree on the encampments, but then you have the challenge. I've had this challenge where I've spoken in front of crowds, right, and the parents will stand up and they say, yes, it's great, but as parents, we're so worried about our kids. We're worried about them being doxxed. We're worried about their job. Yeah. No, but there's a real target, right? These kids who are out on the encampments are putting everything on the line at a very young age in a way that maybe we didn't have to of our generation. They're not playing the pro-Israel folks when they're coming for people and their jobs and their livelihoods and their physical safety. And when people ask me straight up, what would you say to your kid in that situation? My kid is in college. It's a very hard discussion to have. What do you want them to do?
But this isn't new, right? Like,
I mean, if you go back to Vietnam, and but social media's made everything worse. That's the problem.
Yeah, but I still, Femi, I'm relating to your Blue Sky posts all the time. I mean, I look at that as what those students were able to inspire across not just other college campuses, but the world was important. The media did a lot to suppress that. And so the skills that those students picked up in organizing, in creating communities, interdisciplinary, multiracial, multi-religious, those are real world skills. And I guess part of the problem with academia, and it's a whole other panel, is that we've used education solely for the purpose of getting a job. And I'm not saying that those things aren't important. But again, I'm in awe of Gen Z. They don't put up with the crap that us millennials I would just say that think expansively of what skill acquisition looks like, right? And I would say a lot of the skills that I gained, I mean, yes, classroom, but it was from my student groups, putting things like this together, right? So yeah, to think expansively about that, about skill acquisition, and particularly those of you with social skills, because we know that those are, with the age of AI and siloing, those of you who still retain the ability to connect with other people, to hold space for other people, to, you know, we have this obsession with, I have my boundaries and I'm gonna cut content. Again, the discipline and being able to be uncomfortable and do the literally like the labor of like loving on people and creating community with people who you might not like that much. Like that is a crucial survival skill right now.
I remembered what I was going to say, which is that it's true, absolutely true, that every generation thinks they're the first to experience something, but this young generation in particular, they either had their high school graduation or high school years severely disrupted by COVID, or college. They started college remotely. And so what I've seen is that they're really, really hungry for in-person community. Some of them may not even know that, and it sounds like this work is what you're already doing, but continuing to push young people to form those in-person community connections and events and get that experience is really important too.
Just in terms of precedent, very quickly, I got to say, I quote you often when I speak to young people. You have this amazing quote: our ancestors accomplished more with less against worse. Lock in, which I think is a very inspiring and strategic and true point. And I keep that at the forefront of my head as well.
All right, we have one last question. I'm sorry, I wish I could get to everybody. But you guys are very wordy, that's why.
Sorry. Hello, my name is Jess. Thank you for being here and taking my question. Going back to the question in the back, I was wondering, how do we reclaim our power when we're using the social medias that are now owned by oligarchs? Half the American population is on Instagram, and also half the American population shops on Amazon, fueling these guys. And we keep giving them more power regardless of maybe people's personal political affiliations. And then on the other side, when Elon Musk bought Twitter, I saw a lot of people flee Twitter, but then it became boring at best and 4chan at worst.
So true. Sorry.
And then we've mentioned Blue Sky a few times, and now it's just we have two silos when Twitter used to, I mean, back in the day, kind of felt like the digital third space. And now talking about the lack of in-person third spaces, especially Gen Z, that missed out on a lot of in-person connections, how can we take back the power from oligarchs when they own now the digital third space, when that's a lot of people's only third space?
There's no good, easy answer to that question. It is one of the big issues of our time, without a shadow of a doubt. It's very hard to kind of undo it in the place they got to. I'm going to give a very boring, conventional kind of social democratic answer, which is you got to vote for politicians who are going to break up big tech. Like ultimately, we can do as much, protesting and resisting and communicating and organizing, but laws have to be passed. Regulations have to be imposed. And there was a time when that was normal. We live in an era now where regulation is a bad word on both sides of the spectrum. You see Chuck Schumer hosting big tech bosses in his office, including Musk. No, we actually do need a kind of Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren vision. Dare I say, Lena Khan, someone who they hated, and Mamdani has now made co-chair of his transition team. And, so I am all for, political action, public protest, or the military strategy. I'm all for that, but ultimately, a politician has to vote in a legislature to pass a law or regulation that is going to deal with the excessive power of these big tech companies, with their inability to regulate themselves. You saw the story that just came out the other day about the latest Meta story, about how they knew what was going on in terms of child sexual abuse, and they just let it go because they didn't want it to affect their numbers, the growth with young people. So that kind of stuff, there is only one solution to that in the short term, which is better regulation. And that requires people in America voting for politicians who will promise to and then do regulation.
All right, I think we're about ready to close. So any final comments from any of you? Maybe we can go across and just quickly say whatever you'd like to say. It's closing remarks.
Thanks for coming out. I guess if I can just add one more thing, I mentioned this earlier, but just in response to the last question, spaces like this, conversations like this, I don't just mean thank you for coming out as a throwaway. I do think being here with people in physical space, that's the kind of meeting we need to get comfortable with, not just to kick ideas around, though this has been great, But to do some plotting, because if we're going to get the legislation that we want, we probably need to get comfortable picking out targets, identifying bad guys, and saying 100%. Politicians, go after Elon Musk, go after Ellison, go after whoever. And I think the more we can get comfortable talking in person, not through platforms that those people own, but through platforms that guys like this own, right? Maybe we'll have a better kind of political shot.
I suppose, we're heading into winter, and I'm planning to take a good amount of time to think and to read and to study. And I think a lot of, again, I think a lot about self-discipline and how do I, even as a person, like I said, cultivate some of these habits of consistency of working with people, that are different. But even I would say it's interesting to me that a lot of journalists and Black female journalists actually are saying, I'm going to write and read, and I'm going back to school right now. And I would say just for me right now, reading about history, study, even the practice of gaining our attention back, because part of the sort of all these false flag media plays, this scatterbrain that we have when it comes to social media and these algorithms, how, 1 minute you could be seeing a cute cat photo and the next minute seeing the most horrible, atrocious thing. I think very consciously about, if we're going to do the deepest, most profound work that we can, we need to regain like control of our own focus and our own attention, our own inner voices. And I think that's advice that I would have to anyone who's starting out even in journalism. And I've said this in an interview that like, if there's anything that sort of saved me in this moment, it's that I trusted in my own voice and my own values and my own convictions because I'm grounded in a history, in study. And for that, like it matters, integrity matters, where trust in people matters. You trust Mehdi, you trust because we've done the work. But yeah, that's one thing I would say is use this season. It's been a hard year. It's been a hard-ass year. But to go inward a little bit and to really, really assess what your values are and what you're willing to do in this moment. And from there, everything actually becomes clear and easy and it kind of flows and people flow with you. It sounds cliche, but it's true. So that's what I would say from my experience.
So very quickly, I'll just say two things. Number one, there's a great quote from Alice Walker. She says, the biggest way people give up their power is to think they don't have any power. And that is what the people in power want you to think, that we are powerless, that we can't change things, that we can't have an impact, that everything is inevitable. And I think, don't believe that shit, right? Come out on nights like this, take to the streets when you need to take to the streets, organize when you need to organize, accept that there are more of us than there are of them, accept that we can be victorious and that the fascists can be defeated, have been defeated throughout history and across the globe. So that is one thing I would say is how you keep hope alive is by keeping action alive, because you can't have any hope without action. And number two, I would just say the Cajun chicken pasta here is amazing. So check that out before you go.
I think that is the perfect note to end on. Let me say, subscribe to Zateo, buy and read Femi's books. I
didn't want to say it again, but thank you.
And thank you all to our panelists and all of you for being here tonight.
Thank you and good night.
It's so quiet. Okay. Brilliant. That was brilliant. You guys
Stay right
all
there.
amazing. Oh, come on. What is it? What time is it?
Oh, wow. One, two, three. Thank you.
Nice. You're so good.